Hello, this is Rob Seaman, and you are listening to or watching on the video Whole Earth Radio. Today is season 3, episode 4, and I'm honored to have my guest, a special friend of mine, Julie Dennis Fox. Thank you for being on Whole Earth Radio.
Thank you for the invitation. What an honor and a pleasure to sit down with you, Rob, after all these years. I always love checking in. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Before we say anything, and I know you have kind of an important announcement to talk about, and I really want to talk about what you have been doing and what your new position is, new and exciting position we get to sort of announce here, which is really cool and exciting. But I just wanted to go back and sort of honor how you and I met when you were National Educator for Source Naturals, I mean,
Wow.
and Threshold Enterprises.
It has been a while. And I was with Source and Planetary in the 90s. And I think I met you then during that time when DSHEA was just getting passed. We were working on a grassroots level to get DSHEA passed. And I think it was during that leg of my time in the early 90s, working for Source, working for Planetary. And the reason why I wanted that job, I was living in Santa Cruz, where there's just a plethora of herbal knowledge and herbal teachers at that time. And I was looking for my new mentor, my herbal mentor. And I went to a lecture with Dr. Leslie Tierra. There was some kid named Roy Upton going to be there. I believe Chris
Kid.
Hobbs was there. All these really esteemed, rich teachers and bases of knowledge. And so the teachers started talking and introducing. I think at that point it was called the American School of Herbalism or something like that.
Yeah.
And where's Roy? Everybody kept asking, where's Roy? Where's Roy? And he was late. So when Roy walked in and started talking, I said, there he is. That's my herbal mentor. This is the one I've been seeking. And a position came up at Planetary Herbals to work with Roy. And I said, this is mine. I have to get this job. So I went to Threshold, the parent company of Source and Planetary, and I interviewed with Roy, and I was focused. He said, you're going to have to answer phones, right? I said, yep, got it. No problem. You're going to have to do some filing. You're going to have to file papers and do this sort of boring stuff. Great, no problem. And so I got the job, which I still am just so, I just feel so blessed to have had that opportunity pre-DSHEA when I was able to work with Roy, and customers would call up, how do I use andrographis? And then I'd turn to Roy, or my mom has cancer, what do I do? And I would turn to Roy and say, this person's mom has cancer, what do they do? And Roy first would say, well, take them to a doctor. Like, what are they doing calling here?
Yeah.
Then he would go on and relay some information that I could relate to the customer at that point. So it was incredible. It was an incredible education that continued my passion for botanicals and just dug me in deeper into the roots of herbalism. And I'm just so grateful. So yes, I met at that point just these icons that turned into icons and legends. I met you, Tom Dedant. It really was a hotbed of people that continue to grow with the industry that I'm still connected with. So what a time. It was really fun. I gotta
Oh
say
my gosh. Yeah, you're just taking me back. I'm there with you. The 90s was an incredible time for natural health and healing, and what an explosion of interest into these ancient modalities and sort of figuring out where it fit into American culture and commerce and how that affected all of our lives. And of course, about midway into that decade, DSHEA came along, and yeah, that was about the time, that I came in, and wow, just an amazing shift. And now we've had probably several shifts since then, but we're still here and we still care about what we're doing. And yeah, thank you for mentioning Roy Upton and Tom Dedant, some of those. I mean, just so many amazing people, yourself included, came out of sort of the threshold culture, which was very wild, wild west, I feel like, back in the day. And I don't know, maybe it still is. I haven't checked in over there in a minute, but it probably everywhere is a little less wild, probably a lot less wild west
Yeah,
than it was.
indeed. And it's been a trajectory. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight. I started in the industry as a teenager at the age of 15, working in a health food store in North Hollywood, Los Angeles, and also at Burger King. They were about a block away from each other.
I worked at Burger King
You
too.
did,
Yeah.
with the orange and the brown suit. You
Oh
know, we
my
did what we
gosh.
had to do. I was always really motivated and I wanted to start traveling as soon as I could. So,
That was around the time I went vegetarian
okay,
originally, was
right.
working at Burger King and yeah.
Yeah, the stories that really opened my eyes to solidifying which way I was going to go. And that was going to be natural. I know the Burger King customers, we all have a heart that beats and we're all in this human soup together. But I could definitely recognize that the Burger King folks were angry. They were angry. They were large and not in charge. And the health food store people, this was in the 70s, were just walking on clouds. And I remember the day I was reading a little pamphlet on golden seal, standing at the register, and the sun was beaming in. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I'm reading this pamphlet on golden seal, and all of a sudden I'm realizing this little plant that looks totally nondescript to me at that time, with a leaf and a little red, seed up top. It does all this, helps with stomach upset, inflammation. It has a rich tradition in indigenous cultures. It had chemical constituents. And I knew in that moment it was going to be a lifetime of working with botanicals, touting the benefits of botanicals, and making a career out of it, ideally. So I had an epiphany at 15 and saw, and in fact, that little pamphlet was written by Sarah Katz. We realized later on in this conversation with her, one of the founders of Herb Farm, she wrote that pamphlet. So it's, I'm in it. I mean, I feel like this is my political statement. If I could turn somebody on to the benefits of garlic, just try a little garlic in your diet along the way. It could help support all these not metaphysical, but all these
Physical and metaphysical needs.
metaphysical and physical. I felt like it could help a person live a healthier life. We'd be happier within our bodies. We'd be happier in our homes, with our families, in our communities. There'd be less pharmaceutical runoff in the environment. I mean, it was a win-win. So I knew that was the gauntlet for me that I was going to pick up and champion for the rest of my life. And it's been it's been a while.
Yeah, I can relate to that entire thread there, that entire thought of just finding something that spoke to you on number of levels, right? Like intellectually, there's a lot to, if you're scientifically minded, there's a lot to wrap your head around. Certainly a lot of herbalists took that route. I always remember Michael Moore, who really kind of took Western herbalism in this kind of medical direction and taught that way. And then there were other people who were approaching it more maybe from Eastern modalities or ways of looking at the body, Ayurveda and doshas and tongue diagnosis or iridology, so many different ways to approach, but you learn so much. And I found myself becoming a little bit eclectic, and later working for the company Eclectic Institute. But I mean, I think the eclecticism of take what you need from kind of each basket, but really the unifying thing for me for all of it was the plants.
Mm.
Regardless of how you look at them and what diagnosis or overall philosophy you apply to them, the big stars of the show here are the plants, and it's most people don't know. I think now and that's what we've seen in our lifetimes, right? Is it's
Right.
come more to the forefront instead of some maybe fringe, crunchy thing that people are either in all the way in or they're just like, that's weird, to
Right.
where now it's filtering into here's my functional beverage with lion's mane in it. And it's like,
Right.
what is lion's mane? What are these things that you're taking? you have such a rich background because you started from, to me, the point of this holistic kind of passion and just like you're talking about reading the brochure. I mean, you've had a years and years of education and of turning around and using that knowledge to teach. So I just remember, all of the trainings that you've
Oh,
done for
yes.
these store people. There's this wonderful lineage where it's still, there's a lot of ways to reach people, but it's still really the oral tradition. It's really a live person, an individual, a real person, maybe online. I'll say we're doing this
Yeah,
online, so we'll give
love it.
credit to the update on it, but it really is a person talking about their experience with these natural medicines that furthers the tradition, I think.
It's so true. And when an individual could have that their own experience, if we turn somebody on to a botanical and they decide to grow it in their garden and have that relationship with the plant in their garden and then harvest it for their own medicinal use, it's a triumph. It is triumphant for me and for all of us that have been working towards this. And I love that we have all these different modalities from which people can learn. Maybe we have somebody who is shy and doesn't want to go to a group setting or out in the field with an herbalist, but they start by reading something or even seeing a TikTok, some cool young person prancing through the grasses, and then they harvest the grass, and that person watching that video gets turned on to it and perhaps embraces it in their own lives. To me, that is such a triumph. And I love that we have all these different ways to relay a message. And yes, I love the one-on-one and talking to groups of people because I love being together in communities. So, but if it's going to be via video or one of my TikToks, I just joined.
Nice.
I
I
did, right?
I will be subscribing. I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok, but if I were to, it would be, I would want to watch your content.
Thank
And but I want to talk about what you've been doing since then. I went way back. Sorry, I went back to the threshold
you.
days, but you've done a lot since then, and you're now, as I kind of said at the top of this, making a new transition and starting a new journey in a new job, new position. But I want to talk about before we get into what you're going to be going into, what you've been doing, because up until just this new moment, you've been working with women in nutraceuticals.
Indeed. And a shift in my career, my public speaking career of 20 years happened at COVID. Like many people, my job was affected by COVID. My job was to travel nationwide, speaking to groups of people about dietary supplements, botanicals, and nutraceuticals. And then at COVID, that stopped. So I embraced my consultancy. I had started my consultancy decades ago and had a customer client here and there, but I love working for a company. I love the stability. I love finding a company that's the right match for me and representing them and supporting their efforts. So I jumped into my consultancy, puzzled things together, and then at one point 2 years ago, almost to the day, 2 years ago, I saw a post on LinkedIn from Heather Granado, legend in the industry. Heather Granado, she said, I'm working with this organization. I'm president of this organization, Women in Nutraceuticals, and we need a digital media coordinator. I said, Heather, I'm interested in applying. And so applied, I interviewed, and I got the job. And I have to say, it was out of my wheelhouse in some ways. I love to communicate in a variety of ways. And so I was going to continue communicating in a variety of ways. But here it was with an organization, Women in Nutraceuticals. They were new, they're just about 3 years old, have taken off like wildfire. And I jumped in full bore and have been doing their newsletters, their social media on Insta, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, you name it, Facebook networking. I mean, all over the map, just relaying their message. And the message resonates with me. And although I'm making a change in my career and shifting back into education, I will continue supporting women in nutraceuticals. They are here to help support women rise up in the nutraceutical industry on a global level into leadership positions, supporting women in science. We have mentorship programs. We have an entrepreneurship committee. We have support for women seeking funding in nutraceuticals. So it's something that resonates with me, and I have loved working with them and supporting their mission and meeting these incredible people. I've never met a group like this that were so supportive of one another on a professional and personal, but certainly on a professional level. It's a powerful network. And I'm just so honored to have had this opportunity to support them in this way, a very unique way for me to be digital media coordinator. It's something that's now a feather in my cap. You need a newsletter. I know how to do that. So, but I'm making this change. And the
Yeah,
change is, yes, indeed, I'm really excited to be going back to my roots as an educator for dietary supplements. I want to be working for Piping Rock. Piping Rock Health Products. They are a legacy company, been around since 1971. Still family owned, now run by the son of the founder. And they're very passionate about natural products, about dietary supplements, about non-GMO. They have a fantastic program, non-GMO program for their ingredients and their products that they manufacture. They are a manufacturer, and bringing it back full circle for me, they also recently purchased some legacy brands, including Renew Life, Rainbow Light, these brands that are now in their fold, in a fold that really respects the industry, respects the quality, respects the legacy and the legends. So I'm going back to training on Rainbow Light, something I did. I worked for Rainbow Light in the 90s and was their national educator. And now I'm back supporting them in this way.
I did not realize you had been their national educator back in the night. So back then, you mentioned Christopher Hobbs earlier. Was he still involved back
He
then?
was, and that's why I wanted to work for Rainbow Light. I courted them for many, many years before they eventually hired me. I would meet up with them at the trade shows. Yes, I'm still interested. I'm still here. I still want to work for you because of Christopher working there and the quality of the products and the brilliance of the formulations. And so they eventually contacted me. It was Sarah Lovelady who contacted me. And she said, "Are you still interested in working for Rainbow Light? Would you be interested in doing education for us?" And that's when my career in education actually began. And I was recruited by Tom Dedant from Rainbow Light to go over to Planetary and Source Naturals. So,
Wow. Our good friend Tom, Tommy D.
yeah.
Yeah, that, oh man, it's so cool. You just, really paint a picture because it was a different time back then, but I love to see the continuity of legacy brands, working with folks like yourself that have this deep connection to the history of natural medicine in terms of recent history and kind of how we got to where we are, the history of the industry, if you
Sure.
will. And I think there's a lot of Johnny come lately and pop-ups and startups and internet brands. And at the time when Rainbow Light came out, and not we could talk about either one of those two. I mean, both Renew Life and Rainbow Light were pretty groundbreaking in their formation when they came their formulation, I guess I should say, the formulations of Rainbow Light. I just remember the incorporation of herbs and foods and food forms into multivitamins, and this wasn't something, and other formulas, right? I mean, all the formulas were just kind of pushing the envelope of, instead of just giving people nutraceuticals that were kind of pieced together, it was like more of a natural medicine based formulation, it seems.
They founded food-based products. The food-based category started with Rainbow Light, and that was including nutraceuticals, but also including whole foods. And then with Christopher Hobbs's formulations of the botanical blends, just so brilliantly designed. and effective. If you've tried any one of their cold and flu remedies or pain or inflammatory balance support, they are effective. And I think it's that blend of the nutraceuticals at the researched amounts. You know, you can't just throw in a little pixie dust of
Right.
whatever it is, those researched amounts. And then the formulations, and Dr. Christopher Hobbs, he was already at that point combining Ayurveda, but also the principles of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, to be included in the formulations. So just packing a punch and attacking the system. I don't want to say attack, but if you have pain, you want that pain attacked in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So just so well-rounded and so effective and so beautifully designed and so revolutionary, especially at that point. And to find the formulations to have such finesse and such refinement. You know, you and I know that when, for example, echinacea became popular, everybody was throwing echinacea in
I
to
was going to say
everything.
echinacea. I always think when I think Dr. Hobbs, I think echinacea, and he was so generous in sharing sort of his knowledge with every company. You know, I can think of lots of herbal companies that benefited from his work on echinacea, and then it being in the. I remember it being in the Rainbow Light products, and it was so. It all seemed so cutting edge, you know.
Yeah, it definitely was. And to use the appropriate plant parts. A lot of people might have added echinacea to their formulations at that time and today, of course, but maybe they were using stem. Maybe those stems were irradiated, you know, or fumigated in certain ways that were unhealthy. So really digging deep into a company and lifting the lid and seeing how they do things like I was able to do at Rainbow Light and Source and Planetary really says a lot about the quality and the efficacy of the products and why they're still standing, really.
Well, and it just makes me feel really good about, you know, a company like full circle here, Renew Life, where, you know, when you look at what, you know, obviously Brenda Watson, you know, founded that company and eventually sold the company and left that company. And this happens, you know, I had Rick Scalzo on recently, who is the founder of Gaia Herbs and
Right.
is now on his new journey into Kokora. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of great things that he did at Gaia and that other people, you know, on their team, you know, did at Gaia. And so with relate that sort of to Renew Life in a situation where certainly, you know, we all relate that company to the founder in some ways, but when you have this strong foundation of natural medicine, in a way, I mean, it doesn't belong to any one of us. You know, these are traditions and modalities and things that really help people get better naturally and Renew Life as a brand. And kudos, you know, to them for building these companies, you know, but the focus on digestion with Renew Life, there really was nothing like it, I think, at the
Right.
time that they started just really giving you what these such a complete solution to digestive health rather than here, take this one probiotic and that's going to fix everything. Or
Right.
take this enzyme and you'll be good. And it's like, well, that didn't do it, you know. So what's missing could be a lot.
True. And today we know that digestion is it's connected to everything in the body, really. So she was way ahead of her time. Another legend in the industry that set this company up at the forefront of this movement. And I'm so happy that they're still going and now in the fold of Piping Rock, who respects these legacies. So I'm looking
And
forward to that.
what, you know, and I thought it was interesting because you said Piping Rock itself is a legacy company. I mean, it probably is. I mean, and I want to choose my words carefully. I'm not trying to disrespect what anybody did, but let's say a company that has a connection to what these brands are all about rather than it just being an investment, perhaps.
Granted, granted, because when you're working with investors, sometimes the bottom line really is just the bottom line financially. And I respect that, you know, if that's their business, that's what they're into. But when you're mixing that with things that people are going to take for their health, the bottom line is changes. The bottom line is that individual and their health and well-being. So it's great to have a company who respects legacies like Renew Life and Rainbow Light, taking them on into the fold and being able to carry on the legacy of quality and efficaciousness and not just run on the investment, the financial aspect of the investment. So yeah, it's a world of difference because we have both seen. I worked in organoleptic quality control when I was with Planetary, which was
Yeah.
so fun as an herbalist,
Cool.
seeing these boxes of herbs coming in from all over the world. Adulteration is an issue. It always has been since the beginning of commerce. Not just herbal commerce, but commerce. There's always been adulterants. But when you look at a multi-million, billion-dollar industry, there's going to be a lot of people who try to jump in and bait and switch. There's some issues if you're not concerned with quality of ingredients. So
And
it matters.
effective doses. I think about what you were relating that to with the products that we have aligned ourselves with. I think, and similarly, and because what's effective, a little bit might be effective, but if there's a clinically proven dose, at least we can hang our hat on that. And I see products that don't even the proprietary blend has an appropriate place, in my opinion, many places, but there are just times where it's like, okay, do I trust this company that made this gummy that listed that it has beetroot, nitric oxide and this and that, and they don't tell you how much of any of it. And then they list also some, how the game works, right? They list some
Yeah.
cheap ingredient and you have to guess how much of the active, which we both know is much more expensive than the cheaper ingredient. How do you think they formulated that? Was it based on what would be the most effective? But it comes down to whether you trust the brand and the people who work with it.
That's why I've always loved working with brands. Those brands that I especially love, like Source, Planetary, Rainbow Light, Renew Life now, to be able to see what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm a fan of all of those because I've been behind the scenes and I know the quality of the ingredients. Outside of that small group, it really is a matter of trust and digging deep and seeing who's behind the brands and what do they care about and what are, it does take some investigation. I find ignorance is bliss. So the more you know, the more you want to dig deep and see who's behind this stuff. So there are some great brands out there. I'm a big fan of Now, for example.
Yeah.
They've been around forever, and I know a bunch of people that work there. And because of the conversations I've had with them, I've grown to love them more and more. So there are a lot of great companies out there. Not everybody's driven by the financial bottom line. There are a lot of people, and even the small companies that are really passionate about bringing health to the community. So it just takes a little digging.
Well, I've got to bring this full circle here. I can't, I have to point it out because it just this, I'm always kind of connecting random threads in my head. It's kind of how I got into all this. But Now Foods, which is right here in our backyard, and we're in Chicagoland, right? So this is Bloomingdale. They're right around the corner. Wonderful company. Now Foods is family owned. Their commitment to natural and everything is really fantastic. Just a wonderful company. But they have invested in a so I'm looking up the exact name, but because I want to make sure I get it right. Now Arena. I thought that was it. I just wanted to double check. So I don't know if you remember, but gosh, many, many years ago, probably 20, you came to Chicago to do a dinner training. And I remember I was driving around. This might have been more like 10 years ago now that I think about it. Maybe, timelines don't really matter so much, but my kids were young. How about that? My kids were young and I had them in the back of the car because, I picked you up from the airport. We're going to the dinner training and they actually came to the dinner training. This was at a sort of a transitional period in our life. It was an interesting time. And I remember we're at this restaurant. It's right across from Trump Tower there. The visual, if they need, and we're riding around before that. And my daughter, I want to guess I better get this right. She's 21 now. So I'm going to guess she was probably 11.
Oh my gosh.
And she just was telling you, you know how precocious kids are sometimes. She was going to be in sales and she was going to work with all this stuff. And we had some grapes we got from Whole Foods or something. And you said, okay, try to sell me these grapes. And I remember she just went all in and she was like, these are the
So
best grapes. They contain vitamin C and, you know, they're whole food and just
sold.
went all in on it. And
Sold.
she remembers that. She
That's
remembers that still. She's like, oh, yeah, I totally remember that because you had, you know, asked her, you know, engaged with her
what
and
you got.
it creates this ripple effect. But now, I'm sorry, and this
Amazing.
is a lot about me, but
Amazing.
my son is graduating tomorrow night at Now Foods Arena.
Get
He,
out.
he will walk with his high school diploma at Now Foods, God willing, at Now Foods Arena. And
It's amazing.
look how far
Congratulations.
everybody has come. I mean, everything has just, and it's so perfect when you look back. It's like,
It's
you know, when
amazing.
things get better, they don't have to get worse. You know, I mean, so we have this idea that when business grows, oh
Mm,
man, it's getting so corporate. That's going
yeah.
to be the death of everything. But you know what? If you do it right and you get the right people, we can take the vision of the founders and our predecessors, you know, to the
Yeah.
next level.
100%. We've seen this over and over. It gives stability, it gives some foundation from which to work that perhaps the original founding company was struggling with and to grow. And that's the point. Like, I want more people to embrace this stuff. So, the more solid of a foundation that company is given, that legacy company or otherwise, the new company even, the more they could grow and the more people will be able to take advantage of these things that could provide health, support health. So it can be a win-win, 100%. And we've seen it. Conversely, we've seen it go the other way too, where it is just about the money and often those don't last that long. Sometimes they don't last, or sometimes they get sold again to eventually finding a home with a company that has a solid financial foundation, but also the passion for natural. So that's what I see at Piping Rock.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I got to tell you that that really, you know, worked in the industry a minute, but you know, even if I'm not working with a company, I think like you, I'm a fan of these brands. You know, I'm a consumer. I walk into a store anywhere in the country and I am looking for products just like anybody. And so I find it always interesting with what we're presented with at the shelf and who do we trust. And I hate to see brands that I have valued go downhill. So when I see that they're working with good people, I know that they're going in the right direction, you know,
Yeah.
that they're going to remain a brand you can trust. And that's kind of, they're building it sort of one brick at a time, one person at a time, or, but it going in the right direction is a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a couple other things because I know it's really exciting. You're starting to work with Piping Rock, but so where I know you're previously been working with the American Botanical Council
Love them.
and with CannaJoint. So are those two things still going on sort of concurrently, or where are
You
those
know,
projects?
with the American Botanical Council, I parted ways with them. It was a mutual, it was time for me. I had been there for about 8 years and needed to focus my effort and my time elsewhere. I love them. I love the American Botanical Council. Of course, Mark Blumenthal can do no wrong. He's my favorite mensch. I just adore that guy. And just so honored to have had that time at the American Botanical Council reviewing botanical research for the Herb Med Pro database with Kathy Rose Patrone, another legend and somebody I absolutely adore forever. Where was that going? I
Oh,
get
CannaJoint. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. But yeah.
yeah. If you don't know ABC, the American Botanical Council, anybody listening to this, I'm sure you do. Everybody listening to this will know them, but if you don't, look them up.
We'll put a
Uh,
link. We'll put a link to the website, you know, I think because yeah, no, the American Botanical Council, yes, is very important resource and advocate. And so, I mean, the fact that I totally hear you, I just, I think 8 years is probably a long time to work anywhere, especially in something that probably becomes a labor of love a lot of
Right.
times. But
Exactly. So it was hard to sever that, but we're still in connection. And CannaJoint relief, I have topical products with the herbal blend. That's still going. I'm the passive person at the company at this point. I set up the formulations, and that was, I don't know, over 10 years ago or so, really at the beginning of CBD, because there's CBD in it, but I didn't want to just rely on CBD. There's hops, there's ginger, there's lavender, white willow, there's a variety of ingredients, but it was at the beginning of the CBD boom. And I thought, well, I know herbal products. I could put something together, and I put something together, topicals, and put a label on it and got it out. It actually was in Sprouts for some time in about 400 stores nationwide. And at this point, I'm the passive person behind the scenes, don't have much to do with it, but I believe my name is still on the website as the formulator. But no, I'm going full time into piping rock. And
well, and I am so glad to hear that, and I think it's just fascinating to me because when you look 100 years or maybe even 150 years. I went to a place, I love to talk about this, the J.R. Watkins Company, and they're in Winona, Minnesota. And it goes back to when herbs were part of our diet more, spices and things, culinary,
right.
herbs. And they have this wonderful facility. It's been there since the 1850s on the banks of the Mississippi. If you're ever in Winona,
Wow.
Minnesota, you got to go check them out. And they're at the shows. They're either at every expo. They've got the old medicine wagon that'll
Right.
say J.R. Watkins, on the
Yeah, yeah,
side,
yeah.
and it's become many different things. I mean, I'm not, it's just an interesting company, but the history of it. And I went during COVID. That's the only time I've ever been because I was actually calling on the co-op in on the other side of the river in La Crosse, Wisconsin. But
Okay.
when you go on the other, you go across the Mississippi and you're in Winona, Minnesota, that's where the J.R. Watkins. So you can just, it's amazing. And I went
Incredible.
and they had a little museum in their kind of gift shop where you can just, that's so cool. And
Yes.
just the history of really, in a way, in a different way of herbal medicine and herbal tradition, because there was a time, back in the 1800s, there wasn't a clear distinction between food and medicine with spices and like you,
As it should be.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing. I did not, because it was COVID when I went, I did not, they said, oh, you got to come back when they let us open up because you got to see all the Tiffany glass inside. So
Oh,
that's on my bucket list is go back to J.R. Watkins and do the inside tour.
how incredible. And back to a simpler time where what we ate really was food as medicine. It's something we do all day throughout the day, eat. Wouldn't it be great if what we were eating was supporting health and vitality and life force? And it can. So I love actually how we're more and more seeing that in younger generations with their smoothies, with their, they're putting, like you mentioned, lion's mane into their drinks and whatnot. I love that we're seeing more and more of these functional foods emerging, continuing to emerge. It's already a huge category, but continuing to emerge and turning people on to the fact that what we consume, here I have some green tea and ginger, what we
Yes.
consume really affects us molecularly, physiologically, our brain health, our thought health, really all of it, our digestive health. So I see that more and more people are embracing this, and J.R. Watkins is part of that early American legacy, and of course the indigenous culture. Food as medicine was a daily. Food as medicine wasn't a term,
It was the daily reality, yeah, and the
Yeah.
connection, so we honor the Native American tradition in herbs and herbal medicine and all of that, and so much of the early Western herbalism was drawing on these herbs that Europeans had never seen. They didn't have echinacea. I believe they
Okay.
they brought it back to Europe, and worked on cultivating it there, but it was pretty strictly Native American, I believe,
Yeah.
and what other black cohosh is pretty indigenous, pretty strictly indigenous.
Yeah. Mormon tea, which we can't access anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, it's an
Uh,
ephedra. Yeah.
yeah, Phaedra Lake. I don't think it's a true Phaedra,
Is it not? Yeah, is a yeah.
but
It,
one of
it
the best things for asthma relief. Unfortunately, not accessible anymore. What else? Milk thistle, I believe, is indigenous to America. I
yeah.
remember harvesting before milk thistle blew up. I think Christopher Hobbs was instrumental in that. We went harvesting with him, just a small group of us, three or four, just taking the little black seeds out of that thistle. So powerful. And then blending it up and using it as a tincture in our own homes, and then reading the little pamphlet on milk thistle, and then seeing it in formulations, and now seeing it, many, many decades later with hundreds, if not thousands of studies supporting its usage for liver health, for inflammatory balance. I mean, starting from our native lands. This stuff is so powerful. And it's interesting when people look at botanicals and they're used to perhaps a pharmaceutical that says, if you have a stomach issue, use this product. It'll work on your stomach issues. But when you're looking at a botanical, it has hundreds, if not thousands of different chemical compounds that could do a variety of things. So I think that could be a little confusing for people, but we're getting there.
I like to say that drugs have side effects and foods have side benefits, foods and plants, I mean, yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think to me, our struggle, those of us who've been in the industry for a little bit, is really, to use a 90s phrase, is to keep it real. And part of keeping it real, I think, is keeping the medicine, the natural food and herb medicine real. And so, I have no connection to this company, just picked up this green juice. It's a urban remedy.
Nice.
And, I looked at this and I'm like, man, it was a couple dollars more than the other one. But in addition to cucumber, celery, spinach, it's got dandelion juice, parsley juice, and burdock root
That
juice.
is amazing.
And I was just like, whoa, I have a feeling that's what I should have, because I wish I had time to get up, and harvest some. I mean, I live in a city, so I mean, I even if I had the time, I'm not sure I would want to eat the dandelion root I could harvest, much less juice it. But so we've got a little bit of, I mean, the urban remedy name in this product, and this is just, it's encouraging to me that there is still this cycle of the good products, the good ideas, the really good plants and beneficial plants kind of rising to the
Yes.
top. And I think it's funny. I just want to ask you about standardization a little bit, because when you were talking about milk thistle, I asked Rick Scalzo about this because, I mean, I think we all saw, the 90s, we're talking about, oh, this surge of interest in natural medicine. Isn't this great? And we saw the downside very quickly, like with St. John's wort back then. And
Right.
because people were hyper focusing on a constituent, in that case,
Yeah.
hypericin, there was adulteration because there was no focus on the complete profile of the flower, but just, oh, let's look for this one little, they were turning, a marker compound into an isolate, you know,
Everything. Yeah.
an isolate that they could then, if that's all you're looking for, you could take a different plant entirely and put hypericin in it. Looks like St. John's wort.
Yeah.
I just wonder with something like milk thistle, where, we were taught you can just take the seeds and use like a coffee grinder, some little grinder, and just eat them. And the amount of active, and actually, shout out to the late Dr. Ed Allstat from Eclectic Institute, started measuring the amount of, is it silymarin or
Mhm.
the different compounds that make up silymarin. I guess it's more than one, right? There's different compounds, but that there was a therapeutic dose comparable to a standardized product, whereas everyone's being told, oh, you have to take that 80%, Silimarin. It's like, well, you don't really need to do that. You don't need to standardize it because nature has provided an active dose in actually like a small handful of seeds.
True. Although most people are not going to grind, go harvest their seeds and grind them up, or even
Fair
order
point.
seeds and grind them up. And I think there's a place for both. I think if the majority of the studies are saying this percentage of silymarin is going to be efficacious in a product, securing that amount of that chemical compound, I think is a good idea if you want it to be efficacious as it is in the studies. And I'm not talking about just one study. I want to see throughout the years and the majority of confirmations of the research. And did you know that Planetary Herbals trademarked the name Full Spectrum? They didn't keep a lock on who could use that terminology, full spectrum, but that's their trademark term, full spectrum.
Wow.
Which
I didn't
I
realize.
love that concept, like confirming that you're going to get a certain percentage of the efficacious compound.
Yep.
But also, like we mentioned, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemicals that work together in that botanical for our health, and not just one chemical compound. That's such an allopathic approach, and there's a place for it. I definitely feel there's a place for it. But for day-to-day maintenance of health and well-being, full spectrum is for me the way to go. I want to get the full spectrum of chemical compounds in each of the plants.
I love that approach. It's kind of the best of both worlds, I think. And if it's done in a very thoughtful way, like the companies we're talking about and dealing with, then you really do have that best of both worlds, not the other approach where it's sort of, you alluded to, the kind of formulating based on the label and kind of how it looks and having window dressing of ingredients. And
Mhm.
that's what we're really talking about, is products that have substance, and counting on people that know what that looks like, and people like yourself that we trust and that people trust, to help us find products that will really encompass the healing power of nature rather than just be a neat marketing thing. Oh, look at me, I'm drinking a green juice. It's like, I didn't pull $7 out of my pocket to
Come
look
on.
cool at the gym, in case anybody thought I did.
You
you
can do
know
that without the juice.
Yeah, thank you. But anyway, it's, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talk. I could talk to you like probably literally all day about herbs and foods and the industry, but you got to promise me that you'll come back once your journey with Piping Rock has gotten more fully underway. I'm so happy that we're able to make the announcement, sort of celebrate that. So congratulations, if I didn't say it already, on the new position, but I celebrate it because I think this is really a part of just keeping it real in natural health to me, that like it reaffirms the substance of what we're doing when legacy brands find legacy people, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's a good fit. That makes sense.
Kind of
So,
like us,
yeah.
legacy individuals, we're continuing on doing the work that we've been doing for all these decades, and just know that it matters. What we do in our day-to-day work matters for the larger story here. Let's keep doing it.
Amen. Well, on
Thank
that
you.
note, I will just say thanks so much,
Thank you
Julie,
so
and
much, Ron.
we'll talk to you again soon. And thanks for being on Whole Earth Radio.
My honor, my pleasure. Thank you, Rob.